Ambassador, if I may invite you to speak to us about U.S. policy in the Levant, please.
Thanks, and I first want to give my thanks to His Majesty King Hamad, the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Salman, and Sheikh Nasser. I think being here with a group of professionals like all of you is such a gift, because what we find with one another is what we're missing in our daily dialogue. So my intent is to give you an overview of what President Trump's vision is without burdening you with a lot of philosophy that you're not going to be interested in. Because what you really want to know is what's happening, where are we going, what does Gaza look like, how's Syria, what's Lebanon doing, and how Turkey and Saudi Arabia relating to what's happening in the middle of Syria. So we'll go to your questions. It's more fruitful. But I think what's really of interest, if you take a model of what President Trump is doing. By the way, his message to me was very simple when we started this, which was he had just a few words. And I said, Mr. President, don't bother. I know, make America great and we'll make the world better. He said, that's really not it. The words are, don't confuse efforts with results. Don't confuse efforts with results. For this man means take bold action. Bold action will create momentum, and momentum will bypass the decades and decades of rust we've had on diplomatic cadence in the Middle East. It's never worked. Since 1916, we've started with what everybody hates to hear about the Balfour Declaration and the Sykes-Picot Agreement, what the nation states dividing up as a result of the colonial mandate just wrapped borders around tribes and flags that weren't intended to be nation states. And we've been recovering for 100 years for this. American policy was also equally at fault. We've had maybe 27 regime changes since World War II. We've had 27 disasters. We're still in the aftermath of most of those disasters. Every time we reach in to create a new paradigm, a new voluntary regime, it hasn't worked. So the exporting of these models is not what this president is interested in. What he's interested in is getting your regional participation and going from a payphone to Starlink and bypassing everything else. So what he's doing is leapfrogging along, what you saw happen on June 21st, change the fabric of how America is going to deal in the Middle East. For the first time, a president actually intervened with power behind a peace and prosperity discussion. Now, the rest of the region has an opportunity to fold in. If you look at what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, it was such an amazing event. To have the world leaders, the Middle East leaders, with the European leaders in the background, all uniting around this president in an array of a declaration of saying, we are all here as a voice against fundamentalist terrorism. Unbelievable. Never happened. What does that mean now? What do we do with it? How do we get there? And the fabric of the countries that we'll discuss, I'll get into with you. But the model is really the Manama model. If you look at what happened in Bahrain, you have 250 years of the family dynasty here. Now, the king has been in power a quarter of a century. But if you look at what's happened by global alliance, partnerships, coming back to strength and sovereignty, those are the models that we need to build. Sovereignty is evident. Sovereignty is necessary. But your alliance and your partnerships in this part of the world is essential. And you have a man in Washington who is willing to lead that cause to make it happen. But everybody's got to fold in. Everybody has to give up the scars of the past. It's very difficult to do. But if we don't do it now, we're going to miss an opportunity that will never present itself again. And the Abraham Accords are part of that. What's happening in Gaza is part of that. What's happening in Syria is definitely part of that. And the resistance that's happening in Lebanon is another part of that. So we can talk about these models of what's happening. Syria, with a new regime that came into effect on December 8th. from guerrilla warfare and fatigues to a statesman with 25 million people, a new country, a new opportunity, and President Trump coming on May 10th, and in 10 minutes in Saudi Arabia said, give this man a chance, give this regime a chance. After almost 2 decades of atrocities from Assad, the al-Shara regime steps into place, and in 10 months is speed dating towards something we've never seen. Perhaps even towards the road of normalization with Israel. So we have countries all uniting and saying, great. We've had an issue with Israel since 1928. We had real issues with Israel since 1948. How do we put all that behind us? What's this path of a new Middle East? Middle East has $9 trillion of investable capital. 20 million barrels of oil go out the Straits of Hormuz every day. China buys 11 million of them. You have 30% of all the resources in the world. You have 20% of all the capital in the world. And we're fighting tribes and flags. It's ridiculous. So this president is looking and saying, I'm not going to have boots on the ground. I'm not going to invest U.S. capital in making this happen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be the leader of a bold action. We're going to create momentum. We're going to bolster prosperity and solve these problems from the ground up, not forced from the top down. And that's what's happening in Syria. He lifted the sanctions. We still have the Caesar sanctions. We can talk about that. It's the last one to lift. Senator Rubio got rid of state-sponsored terrorism. It's a look back. It wraps every 6 months, so it comes back December 31st. But this regime has done a very good job in spite of the speed bumps, right? We had problems in Al-Qaeda. We had problems in the West. In Gaza, we had a ceasefire and we have speed bumps. It's going to happen. It's going to happen everywhere. And the only way to extinguish those speed bumps is with momentum and prosperity that has to come from the region. And Turkey, on the other hand, has a different framework. It's a non-Arab Muslim country. It has a stable platform. It's our largest NATO ally besides ourselves. And we just had a love-in between President Erdogan and President Trump. We talked about F-35s, F-16s, S-400s, $100 billion Boeing contract. Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan now on alignment going north. Could be incredible. We have 3.5 million Syrians in Turkey that speak both Arabic and Turkish. And the opportunity is immense. And Syria, in addition to that, is marching towards Israel. We're on our 5th set of discussions with Israel. Border and boundary discussions, de-escalation. You could very quickly have a realignment of a tapestry that we haven't seen in the Middle East. In Bahrain, they have tapestries, and I'll end with this and we'll go to questions, which is called a Sidhu. And we've been friends with the king. The president loves the family and has been friends with the king for 30 years. And one of his people was explaining to me that the Bahraini Sidhu, it has vertical threads and horizontal threads. And the vertical threads are of the strongest kind of thread because that represents the institutions, the military, the education, the healthcare. If you have those things, a society then gets to discussion of religion and politics and then more liberal thoughts at the end. But without education, without security, without stability, without food on the table, nothing happens. The horizontal threads are the diversity of people. This is an example, Sunni and Shias living side by side. We're living in a really difficult zip code. You have the 3 ethno-religious dominant religions in the world living here, the Middle East. We also have 23 of the most viable foreign terrorist organizations in the world, 18 of them within our zip code. So we're fighting all of these counter winds at a moment where you have a president of the United States who happens to be the leader saying enough. 100 years of this confusion, of these old thoughts, of these old ideas, and people not moving off of them, when you have the most dominant region in the world, if you combine capital with fossil fuels, with resourceful people, has got to end. And that's where he is. That's what we're trying to do.
Ambassador, thank you very much. The list is already long, but I thought I might ask one or two before we open up. And the first one is on Lebanon and your expectations regarding the Lebanese government taking full sovereignty and territorial control. The U.S. has asked for a timeline and a plan. Are you happy with what you have, what you've been given? What else would you like to see and when?
So what I'm going to say, I say lovingly because I'm Lebanese. The Lebanese are fantastic at charming you into submission. They talk, they talk, they talk, and they talk. This is not complicated, right? Let me give you how the President of the United States looks at this. He says, okay, so Hezbollah to America is a foreign terrorist organization. That means the flag on Hezbollah says death to Israel, death to America. We get it. You're not our friend. Hezbollah in Lebanon happens to be a political party also. In addition to that, the French mandate, this confessional system that was invented in the 40s that says the president of Lebanon has to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni, and the speaker has to be a Shia. It was based on population and census. By the way, they haven't had a census for 37 years because, of course, that relates to nothing that's happening now. The Maronites are all living in Paris. The Sunnis have gone someplace else. And the Shias, the Palestinians, and Syrians are the majority of what's Lebanon today. So you have the Taif agreement that came in to say, okay, we're going to redo this. This isn't working. We've had war after war after war. We had a war of Lebanon with the Palestinians. Then we had a war of Lebanon with the Syrians. Then we had a war with Lebanon with the Israelis. Then we had a war of Lebanon with Lebanon. Now we have a war with Lebanon with the Israelis. And the Taif agreement says no more militias. You had a Christian militia to start with. The warlords of the Christian militias are still there, by the way. So Lebanon is a failed state. There's no central bank. The banking system is bust. Riyad Salameh, the head of the central bank, has been indicted all across Europe. There's $60 billion missing from the Lebanese banking system. There's another $75 billion if you take 50 billion of euro bonds plus interest. So you have $130 billion of state debt. They refuse to do a gap assessment. They refuse to deal with the World Bank. They refuse to deal with the IMF. The Electricité du Liban, like the Banque du Liban, is bust, is broke. There's no electricity. You have electricity, you need a private generator. You want water, you need private water. You want education, you need private water. So what's the state? The state is Hezbollah. You go south, Hezbollah gives you water, it gives you an education, gives you a stipend, has 40,000 soldiers. LAF, Lebanese Armed Forces, has 60,000 soldiers. The only problem is the Hezbollah soldiers make $2,200 a month. The LAF soldiers make $275 a month. The Hezbollah soldiers have 15,000, 20,000 rockets and missiles. The LAF soldiers are driving old Jeeps, some AK-47s. So which army is which? What's happening here? So the idea of disarming Hezbollah, in our opinion, it's not reasonable to tell Lebanon forcibly disarm one of your political parties. Everybody's scared to death to go into civil war. The idea is, what can you do to have Hezbollah not utilize those rockets and missiles? You have a moment in time. You have Israel, who is sitting ready to make border and boundary agreements with all its neighbors. And it owes America a favor. On June 21st, when President Trump sent those B-2 bombers in, he did something for Israel that was an incredible reshaping of the region. So our message to Lebanon was, end this. Forget about the confessional system. You can't say the word Israel in Lebanon. I say this lovingly. They still call it Dixie, south of the Litani. It's illegal to have a conversation with Israel. What era are we living in? Do you see what's happening? You have America side by side. You have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, two of the smartest people in the world working for President Trump. You've seen Tulsi and Doug and James all here today. You have a team that's working for the world. Get online. You do not have time. Israel, every day, is bombing the south. Why? Because you still have thousands of rockets and missiles that are threatening it. They've been very clear. After October 7th, Israel has said, we are going to defend our boundaries, we're going to defend our borders. You put your weapons down, Hezbollah, and we will not have a problem. We're not going to withdraw, we're not going to have a problem. So we don't have time for this diplomatic cadence. By the way, the diplomatic cadence was used with Iran. And by the way, I like that the Lebanese leadership today is solid. President Aoun, Nawaf, even Speaker Berry. They're trying, but they're dinosaurs. You have to go from the payphone to Starlink, not the payphone to home phones, not home phones then to cell phones. You've got to go to Starlink. And Starlink is you go from Beirut to Tel Aviv. You have that conversation on the blue line, you have the conversation with Syria, and in 4 months you could end all of this. Is that going to happen?
Ambassador, let me open it up because the list has now gone frightfully long. So I'll get a few people in now so that we open it up a bit, and I might ask a first group of 4 or so to make their interventions. Come back to you, and then we'll take a second group of 4. So first one from Turkey, Sinem Cengiz.
Thank you, Bastian. Ambassador Barrack, there is a clear positive momentum in Turkey-U.S. relations, and your role as an ambassador to Ankara has been very significant in fostering this progress. However, there are still serious differences between Ankara and Washington when it comes to Syria in regards to threats against Turkey's national interests coming from specific actors, either SDF or even Israel. In your capacity as the special envoy to Syria, how do you assess the prospects for narrowing the divergences between 2 NATO allies and identifying ways for potential convergences?
Thank you very much. We're keeping track of the questions. I'll get a few more in from Egypt and the Young Leaders Group, Sarah El Menawi.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. My question is about long-term stability framework for the Levant. In recent events, Israel has justified repeated cross-border attacks in Syria, framed as protection of the Druze communities over there. However, these operations not only undermine territorial integrity, but also state sovereignty in Syria, and of course impacting long-term stability in the Levant. From your perspective as a special envoy for Syria, and also for the U.S. holding a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, how do you think the U.S. should balance the protection of vulnerable communities while preserving state sovereignty? And most importantly, how to ensure that accountability is upheld so that such interventions do not become normalized tools for regional management? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the United States, Ragida Dargam.
Yes, Ambassador Barrack, Ragida Dargam of Beirut Institute. I appreciate your frankness about Lebanon, and I share many of your views, but I don't think this is very helpful to dress down the country like you do all the time. When you say, Ambassador Barrack, that you want to help the army and the country, the situation of chaos in Lebanon would not even help your plans for Syria. It might even hurt it. The army is doing its best, and the United States claims and says and declares that it supports the army. Why can't you invest in Lebanon in goodwill, just like you invest in Syria? I know you mean well, but I think your message has been quite harmful. Forgive me for my honesty.
Thank you. Let's take one more from the United Kingdom and from Reuters, Alexander Cornwell.
Hi, Alexander Cornwell from Reuters, to your left. Ambassador, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel appears to be adamant that Turkey will have no role in Gaza in the day after he's ruled out Turkish forces. What role do you see Turkey playing realistically in Gaza, and can the United convince Israel to allow Turkey to play that role? Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go back and we'll take that group of 4 questions. So the divergence or convergence vis-a-vis Syria.
I've
got it? Yeah.
I've got that.
Okay.
So I'll start with the last one. So let's just get factual. The ceasefire in Gaza would not have happened without Turkey. President Trump acknowledged President Erdogan on the stage 4 times. President Erdogan, in the last minute, there were 2 holdouts. Sheikh Mohammed and Qatar had done an amazing job. Everybody had pushed as hard as they could. It was actually Turkey's relationship with Hamas, not declaring them a foreign terrorist organization, that allowed him to push the last 2 over the hump to get to a ceasefire. So the fact that Israel rightly is concerned with Turkey's involvement in a secondary force is because at this moment the rhetoric between both President Erdogan and Netanyahu is that Netanyahu wants a greater Israel. He's going to take over everything down to Turkey, and the Turkey wants the Ottoman Empire back. It wants to take over Israel. Neither is true. So for the moment, I think everything stands still. Turkey will be a participant. I think to the very good question on Lebanon, and look, it's a very difficult issue. So I come back with just facts. You've had UNIFIL for 40 years, $11.7 billion in a peacekeeping force. You've had abject chaos and war for 40 years. You've had 4 failed governments. You lived without a president for 2.5 years. You've had 4 prime ministers executed, and you've had 6 wars in the time that anybody can remember. So I'm not sure what the state is. Lebanon is the beautiful people that live outside of the boundary, and the geography of Lebanon is quite confused. So it's really up to the Lebanese. It's not up to America. America has no skin in this game. America's point of view, this president says, I'm all for counterterrorism. Who's a terrorist? Hezbollah. You have 27 Shia ministers. You have in the parliament. It's a paralyzed government, governed by the foreign terrorist organization who has death to America, death to Israel. So your heart is with the Lebanese people. My heart is with the Lebanese people, and my message is really simple. America is not going to get deeper involved in a situation in which a foreign terrorist organization and a failed state dictating a pace and asking them for more resources, more money, more help. It's simple. Lebanon can do what it wants to do. The path is very clear that it needs to be to Jerusalem or Tel Aviv for a conversation, along with Syria. Syria is showing the way. Syria will get there first. Lebanon can draft in it or not. And Israel will react to them accordingly. We have nothing to do with it. Going to the next question on Turkey, Syria, and Israel. Turkey was responsible for al-Shara on December 8th really being able to take over. And the relationship between Turkey and Syria is very conducive. The 3.5 million Syrians that speak both Arabic and Turkish are looking for opportunities across that border. Both Turkey and Saudi now are playing well with each other in the sandbox, saying we need to have this tapestry of Syria work. Are we all hopeful that the al-Shara regime is it? And by the way, I think it is. You're going to see Assad Shabani, the foreign minister here. They've done an amazing job. In 11 months, Secretary Rubio gave them 8 criteria of what he wanted to look back in state-sponsored terrorism, things you're all concerned with. What are you going to do with the foreign fighters? What do you do with the ISIS prison camps? You have 20,000 displaced people that need to go back, Iraq, Syria, Europe. What are you going to do with chemical weapons? You had some nuclear refuge that needs to be taken care of. Are you going to have inclusion with the Druze, with the 5 Christian communities, with the Kurds? The Kurds, the PKK is the issue in Turkey. 40,000 people lost. SDF as a calibrate of that. The discussions with SDF and onboarding are going amazingly well. Assad Shabani will talk to you about it tomorrow. We're very close to having an alignment. They signed a deal on March 10th. They've gone back to the March 10th deal. There is no congestion between Syria and Turkey. My bet, by the way, with Turkey and Israel is if we hold together, if the momentum holds together, if Jared and Steve and the great teams keep this moving in Gaza, that in not too long of a time you will see a trade deal between Turkey and Israel. Look what's happening above. You have Azerbaijan and Armenia. This is Lebanon revisited. Lebanon is the only one who's not jumping in line. Do you think Armenia and Azerbaijan didn't have the same feelings that we all had on poor Lebanon, poor Armenia? Move to the momentum. This president has changed the entire chessboard. It's happening everywhere. Turkey and Israel will not be at war with each other. In my opinion, it's not going to happen. And you're going to get alignment from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean. And what could happen to this region? Saudi Arabia, look at it, Vision 2030. Who ever imagined it could happen? You take this young prince and turn it on its dime, you can't imagine what's happened. You go to 35 million people. I started in life there as a lawyer. I'm still a recovering lawyer. And I would never imagine, if somebody would have told me that I could see on the streets of Riyadh what I see in women's rights and entertainment and resorts and just the thought process of education. It's happening everywhere. We're catching up, but we need to catch up quickly.
Let me get a few more. We've got, just to let you know, I've got over 20 on the list. We won't get there because we have 13 minutes left, but we'll get a few more in. And I'll take another group of 4 or so. And we'll start with the UAE, Aya Iskandarani.
Hello, this is Aya Iskandarani from AFP. I have a question both about Lebanon and Syria. So about Syria, you mentioned that they're going to get to a deal with Israel. How soon do you think this kind of deal will happen? And is it going to be a purely security deal or go all the way to normalization, as you were saying? And about Lebanon, you were saying Israel is not happy. They might do something. The U.S. is not going to stand in the way. So if the deadline comes by the end of the year and Israel launches a full-blown strike, first of all, is this something that you think will happen, and what would the U.S. do if it does?
Thank you very much. From Bahrain and the Young Leaders Group, Nauf Al-Awadi.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time. So throughout history, there have been regime changes, mainly in the Middle East, mainly in Middle Eastern countries, either through a coup or through the involvement of external intervention. Now, what are the conditions of a state? You have sovereignty, self-determination, land and population. And some of the regimes that originally started, they worked for the country itself, they worked for the population, and then because of the involvement from external state actors, the country becomes worse off than it was. So rather than thriving. So throughout the past 100 years or so, we've had economies change, we've had policy changes, and we've had leaders change as well in terms of ideology. So what are the lessons learned when it comes to involvement in the Levant and the Middle East region? And would you say that external state actor intervention impacts the level of conflict in the region? And in addition to my question is the second question.
Briefly, please.
Sorry. With the different U.S. administrations, we've seen that some lean more towards getting involved in conflict in terms of supporting some parties, and other administrations that prefer peace building and non-intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take Abigail Housloner from the U.S. and the Financial Times.
Thank you. Ambassador, I appreciate your optimism about the progression of the President's peace plan. I think every government represented in this room has told you over the course of recent days and weeks that a two-state solution or Palestinian statehood needs to be part of the plan, the goal, if the president's peace plan is to succeed in the long term. Is the Trump administration listening to these partners? And if so, is the U.S. going to do that? If not, please explain the administration's thinking as to how you believe this long-lasting peace can be achieved without that, without what your regional partners are telling you.
Thank you very much. Let me take one more, and then I'll return to the ambassador, Aliyah Mubayed from the UK. Aliyah.
Yes, thank you very much. Ambassador, I want to ask you about your economic prosperity agenda for the Levant. I mean, we've seen over the last decades that top-down approach to peace and normalization have not, unfortunately, necessarily delivered on the prosperity agenda, whether in Egypt, in Jordan, or other parts of the region. Can you please explain to us how the new approach of the administration, and in particular in the Levant, a region where at least needs $100 billion of reconstruction needs, can this yet another top-down approach to normalization deliver on prosperity?
Thank you very much. Ambassador.
So there's a lot to unpack. So let's talk about what would America do if Israel becomes more aggressive to Lebanon? That's not for me to answer. It's for nobody to answer because it's a factual situation that nobody understands. But I can tell you the president's commitment has been no boots on the ground. We're not getting involved in regional disputes. We got involved with Israel and Iran. We have a stated enemy. We've said innumerable times the region has to take care of itself. So we will be there to support our allies. But this is part of the equation that I'm trying to get all of us to think about, to urge and usher Lebanon. It's clear that Israel has become a dominant ally in this repositioning of the chessboard of what happens in the Middle East. And the Abraham Accords, at least for what we have in front of us, seems to be the road that everybody needs to jump on. Not Islam against Judaism, not Judaism against Christianity, a combined prosperity of saying it's not from the top down going to what happens to the economy, it's from the bottom up. We're building a new hybrid, and that new hybrid has to come from that alignment. So if there's an aggression on the part of Israel, you saw what just happened with the aggression of Israel and Iran. So you make your own determination what happens if Israel becomes aggressive with someone else who is a foreign terrorist organization. It's a complex question. I'm not equipped to give you an answer, but it's not an easy decision.
So there's one question about the lessons from external involvement in the Levant and Middle East. Maybe we'll take that next.
Yeah, the lessons learned. It's what I started at the beginning. The lessons learned are do not go there, right? Since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, everything that the West has done has been a mistake. Taking the colonial mandate and placing it on tribes and flags in religious context has never worked. It just has never worked. So all those centralized models have failed. What's worked is benevolent monarchies. They have worked. So look around our region, look around our zip code, and those have worked. Why? Alignment of religious interests, alignment of political interests, a benevolent and understanding government that doesn't need to be corrupt because it's allocating resources. Many of these are the fossil fuel beneficiaries. So this president has gone to lessons learned and said since 1919, since the Paris Treaty and on, and the San Remo Treaty and the Oslo Treaty, every treaty that has imposed these Western standards has not worked. So what we're trying to do is just usher the availability to the region and say, let's try something new. You have all the power. You have all the money, energy, AI. Look at what's happening with chips. Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, trading the idea of prosperity from just pumping oil to prosperity by creating portfolios of the next regime. A place like Bahrain can benefit from it. It has a definable and understandable legal system. It has an educated working class. A foreigner can own property on any basis. It has understandable work laws. It has no digital tax. These are the things that now can come to bear everywhere.
Can I ask you to perhaps also engage on the question that was asked? Are you heeding partners' calls for a two-state solution? If not, what are the alternatives in your plan here?
Yeah. So, look, it's a complicated question. I think everybody's right? Everybody's running saying just stop this. Stop the senseless killing. However we get there, just stop the senseless killing. So I look at a tremendous victory just getting the hostages back. The day-to-day, we all know you kill one terrorist, you create 7 others. You kill a father, you have 3 sons, 2 daughters, and a wife who now for 100 years have an issue and a problem. Whether now the Palestinians become Israelis and it becomes one state, or there's some hybrid form of what that is, will have to evolve. It's not the issue at the moment. The issue at the moment is time out, stop the killing, get humanitarian care in, start defining what could the essence of a de-escalation and peace plan be, and flood it with momentum. So I think what you're going to see in Jared and Steve's plan as to what's coming, which the world is stepping in, the Gulf is helping us, is you could have a resurgence in which that definition of is it Palestinian Authority, is it Hamas, is it Hezbollah, is it some other definition of Palestinians living in an Israeli environment, could evaporate as you start marrying interests, and that's the hope. And whether it's 2-state or 1-state is yet to be determined.
Let me take 3 really quick questions and then concluding thoughts from the ambassador. From the UAE, Khalifa Al-Suwaidi.
Thank you, Bastian. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time. There seems to be this unwavering conviction that regional peace equates to having diplomatic relations with Israel. Is this how the current admin sees things? I'm curious because it comes across as being the sole metric with which regional peace is measured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the Young Leaders Group and from Egypt, Sameh Mansour.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I have a very direct point. I would like to ask, what is Washington's long-term vision for Syria? Is there a defined political or strategic end state the U.S. is working toward? Or has the approach become one of managing instability indefinitely? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not going to get an easy answer there, I think, but one more, Ross de Sibyl from the UK. Ross.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Barrack. Just widening the aperture, do you think Turkey has anything to teach NATO's central European members about handling Russian air incursions?
Thank you very much. So 3 very different questions. Sole metric for regional peace, the establishment of diplomatic relations with Israel, long-term vision for Syria, and air incursions.
And that last question is going to give me a 3 Tylenol headache. But let's go to is alignment with Israel necessity? The answer is no. I think our position, our recommendation is those countries who boundary and border with Israel need to come to a border resolution. Israel has been very clear after October 7th, anything that threatens that border, they're not going to pay attention to the blue line, the green line, or the red line. They want normalization, they want a treaty and boundary agreement, and they will enforce it in their own right. For instance, looking at Lebanon, we had this, the Biden administration created the cessation of hostilities agreement, November 24th, 2024. And by the way, the agreement was with nobody. Lebanon didn't agree with Israel. Israel didn't agree with Hezbollah because they can't talk to each other. So we created these mechanisms, United Nations mechanisms in between so that the agreements could be amongst us. They were violated in an afternoon. The discussion of Syria, of Lebanon. The Sinai Agreement is the only agreement that's ever worked, by the way, because it cost $3 billion. It was a time where Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. By the way, Marco Rubio, who is the best Secretary of State, in my humble opinion, that we've ever had, is also the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State, which is why I keep saying you have a moment, all of you have a moment in this administration with them to get whatever needs to be done, and it doesn't have to be Abu Dhabi agreeing to a treaty agreement with Israel. If Abu Dhabi decides that it's beneficial to join the Abraham Accords, it can do so, not a necessity certainly for our administration. The advice is, if you're on the boundary or border of Israel, and you're one of those countries, the first step, rather than thinking that you're going to fight them at the moment, is to align with them.
Future vision for Syria?
Future vision of Syria is there is no plan B. I think you have the smartest people in this room. We can all sit and say, okay, can you rely on the al-Shara regime to go the distance? They've been in it 10 months. They've had the sanctions not taken off. So the fuel, they went from 750,000 barrels a day in Deir ez-Zor in the northeast to 65,000 barrels. They're selling at $20 a barrel, carrying it out. How do you turn the lights on? People on the street have maybe 4 hours a day of electricity, 3 days a week of water. Diaspora cannot come back yet. We don't have a banking system. We don't have a central bank. We don't have a correspondent banking system. It's hawalas, right? So the hawalas, you could trade gold bullion on the street, but you can't get a dollar through a bank. That's all just about to change. So our goal is that make Syria the tapestry in the middle of a common resource. The Syrian people are amazing, and they're amazing at things that the other Gulf countries don't want to do. So with Gulf influence, with Turkey helping on that side, with Saudi supporting it on this side, with a peace agreement with Israel, you bolster Iran to the extent that the Iranian regime, the RGC, is a problem for everybody, not the Iranian people. But when you have Iran and the Houthis and Hezbollah saying death to Israel, death to America, you cannot expect this administration to weigh in on anything other than say we are going to weigh in against counterterrorism, and Syria is the place to do that in spades. They're about to sign the de-ISIS coalition letter. I think Foreign Minister Shabani may talk about it tomorrow, which is a huge step. Join 88 other countries in a de-ISIS coalition. For Syria to do this after the Assad regime is remarkable, and it's really due to President Trump and the regional support of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, even Israel pointing to it, and everybody saying, we'll usher you along, we'll help you get there. We understand there's going to be speed bumps.
Ambassador Barrack, thank you so much for the frank conversation, for engaging with the 12 or 13 questions that we got to. Next time we'll add a bit more time and we get another 10 in, but thank you very much for joining us here today. It was a pleasure to have you. I think people appreciate the engagement. We now have we'll leave Russian air incursions for the coffee break, which is about to start now. We then have at 5 o'clock a special session on security sector reform in Syria, where a theme that the IISS has just done some work on. So join that session as well. And now have a good coffee break. And may I ask for one more round of applause for Ambassador Barrack. Thank you very much.